Hello, I'm Javier Hakeem, and this is Harking Back, the bonus episode. I'm going to be talking about the Ghost Tour. If you listen to the 2006 episode I mentioned the Ghost Tour, which was a gig I did for a while. I didn't have time to talk about it in that episode, so I thought I'd do a special bonus episode just about the Ghost Tour, because there's lots to say about that. A Ghost Tour is, if you don't know what it is, it's a tourist attraction, a bit like a tour and a bit of a show where they go and show you haunted sites. They're quite popular around Europe and anywhere where there's been hauntings and stuff like that. People like it. The reason this came about for us is because we were working in the art centre in Christchurch. That's where the theatre was, where I was doing improv and kids shows and things like that. And it was the old university of Christchurch, and it was a ballet school as well. So it had kind of some really old buildings for Christchurch, which isn't that old and if you look internationally, but it was old for Christchurch. And someone that owned the coffee shop around there, a Scottish guy, said this would be a great place for a ghost tour. Not there are ghosts here, let's do a ghost tour, but this would be a great place for a ghost tour. So they decided, okay, we're going to need some hosts for this. We're going to make this happen. And they approached the people at the theatre and said, would anyone like to audition to be a ghost tour host? And I had quit my job that year to be a full-time performer. I needed money. So I immediately put my hand up and said, yes, I would love to audition for this. We auditioned. I got it along with my good friend Dan Bain. And he's got a bunch of podcasts as well, Dan Bain. Look him up. And we've actually got an episode where we talk about all the crappy jobs we did together, and we mentioned this. We auditioned and we got the job. We're going to be hosts. We'd take turns. We'd have two hosts, back up. And they said, congratulations, you're going to be the ghost tour hosts. And they started talking about it, that this is the times, this is going to be the fee. By the way, I was going to pay dog shit. It was paying dog shit. But we needed the money. And then they said, okay, so when are you going to write it? And we were like, what? Sorry, what? What now? And they're, oh, yeah, there's no script, there's no show or anything. We thought you guys were going to write it. Now, looking back, we should have said, that's going to cost you a shitload for us to write the thing. But we were young and naive and stupid and, again, needed the money. And we thought if we were just terrified of losing the gig. So we were like, oh, yeah, well, we can write a ghost tour. We're improvisers, we make up shit all the time. We will write a ghost tour. The problem with writing a ghost tour at the art centre when there's no ghosts is that it's very hard to draw any source material. We had places that we could go around the art centre. So there was the theatre, there was the ballet school, there was the observatory, the old university lecture. These places we could go. And the only place that even had a mention of any sort of ghostly things happening was the theatre. Now, they say every theatre is haunted. What had happened at the theatres? The theatre was part of the university, or the old university was now the theatre. In the top level, in a place called the props room, there was a window and a student had fallen out years and years ago and died. And his name was Henry, and anything weird that happened, they just said, oh, that's Henry the ghost. It was just, on the third floor, it's like the attic of the theatre, and it was a little bit of a creepy place because that's where they kept all the old props from all the old shows, and they kept it in this place called the props cage that was behind this like kind of chicken wire fence, and it just was creepy. And I can imagine anything creaking up there, people would have been, oh god, it's Henry the ghost. But for all intents and purposes, there were no ghosts. And so Dan and I looked at this and we were like, oh shit, now we've got to write this thing, there's no ghosts. So what we did is we looked at everywhere we could go, and this was going to be at night, and we ranked everywhere we could go out of like least creepy to the creepiest. So there was like the props cage, the lecture theatre. There was a little creepy door that we found in the ballet back rooms, and they had this place called the tank room, which used to be used for experiments, like engineering experiments. Like, it sounds creepy. No, it wasn't. It was used for engineering, and they had a giant water tank in there that they would use for physics experiments. But as a result, there was this long kind of room, but it was quite short, very short ceiling, which is a little bit unnerving. We realized, like, this is the creepiest room, especially in the dark. So once we had that, we started making up stories about things that had happened, and like, oh my god, making up ghost stories, like the crap we came up with. Like this little creepy door that we found in the ballet studio, we made up this story about Amelia, the ballet dancer, and she, oh God, I still remember it. She was like the finest of all the dancers. She was the best dancer, and all the other ballet dancers got jealous. And then one day, it was like this little, like the kind of door that leads up into an attic, how it's quite small. It was like that, but on the side, on a wall rather than the ceiling. And we made up this story about the other ballerinas getting Amelia and throwing her in there and shutting the door and locking her in there. And then Amelia starts crying and the other girls are laughing, but then Amelia goes really silent and they couldn't hear anything. And they all leaned in. And that's when Amelia started screaming and screaming and screaming. And the other girls just backed away, and it wasn't until one of the teachers came and heard the screaming and opened the door, and Amelia came out. And we don't know what she saw in there, but she never danced again. Like shit like that. It was just ridiculous. We had a dress rehearsal with it, and what we realized is darkness is your friend. When it's come to making people scared, we would give the audience and the audience was a maximum of 20 people. We had these crappy little lanterns that we'd give them. And what we realized is these lanterns, they looked like they could light up the way for the audience. They did not. The host had a big torch and we could light the way when we wanted to. And what we realized is whenever you can, darkness. So the torch was off more than on. And these lanterns, they were like tiny little electric bulbs which lit up nothing. So the audience could actually felt like they had light. They didn't. And we actually ended up turning them down once we realized that the less light they had, the better. We also had an operator. So it was a host and an operator. An operator was the one that ran around unlocking doors for us and also providing little effects like swinging doors and slamming things. We found a creepy doll in the props cage that we called Kelly, and we did subtle little things like Kelly would move around the tour and be placed there as the audience would come in, and some people would be like, is that doll again? It was very subtle. And by the end, there were the slams and the noise would become bigger and bigger and bigger, and then finally in the tank room, we had this bit where we swept the torch across a corridor, and we had the guy at the end of the corridor just kind of stand there and make a little silhouette, and we'd flash the torch past him, and you'd see him, and then he was instructed to move away immediately, and you'd put the torch back, and he's gone. Shit like that, right? We had a costume of like a Victorian kind of frock coat and top hat. You did it in character. Your character was Dr. Aloysius Mort. And, oh man, we wrote the thing. Press night comes around. We've got, this is going to make or break the tour. We've got all the media in. I'm chosen to do the press tour tonight. And it's just not working. It's not hitting. Like, no one's getting scared. We're about 3/4 of the way through the tour, and people are looking bored. They're, like, checking their watches and stuff. We're in the props room of the theatre, which is one of the creepiest places. And it's just not hitting. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. But I've got to stay in character. Just keep going. And we're about to move into the next room. And then something crazy happens. This one woman on the tour, I'm about to reach for the door, and she just screams out. She says, "Don't go in there." And I stop, and everyone looks at her. And I realize she's freaking out. And I'm thinking, great. And I stop and go, sorry, what? What is it? And she goes, I don't know why, but I just have a feeling that if you go through that door, something terrible is going to happen, right? And suddenly you can see everyone else start kind of like looking at her, and this is where we realize that fear spreads. This is where we realize, oh, okay, if you find one person that's scared, it is so much easier to get them more scared than try and make everyone scared. And so I'm really leaning in, I'm talking to her, and she's freaking out, and some people are starting to freak out around her. And I make a big thing of like, okay, if anyone doesn't want to go on, we can stop here, but we're going to go and continue the tour. Do you think you can continue the tour? And she's like, okay, yes. And we had this thing that happens that as we go through the door, our operator does this big slam on a chest, and as half the people are through the door, the chest slams, and there is a stampede. The people at the back scream, which pushes the people in the middle, and suddenly this thing is alive and everyone's shitting their pants. I don't know if that lady, I could have kissed that lady. She saved this tour. and then we get into the tank room, which is where the tour ends. We do the silhouette bit. Like, oh, by the way, in the tank room, you take everyone's lanterns off them. So the only light is operated by the ghost tour operated with the torch. We do the silhouette bit where like people think they see something, people scream, they freak out, and it's a success. And whew, we suddenly realized that, okay, after this press tour, we changed tack completely. We're like, okay, making people laugh is one thing, which we've been used to. Making people scared, totally different. And we took this idea. It sounds a bit mean, but you've got to find the person that looks like they're going to freak out. You've got to find the weakest. It's the opposite of prison. Rather than finding the biggest and the baddest, you find the weakest, the meekest, the one that looks like they're going to shit their pants. You find them, and you make them scared. Forget everyone else. The point is, it's like infection, all right? You want to make them as sick as possible with fear that it infects everyone else, rather than trying to get everyone, right? And so little things like you kind of get them to go first in places where you know there's going to be a effect, a slam, a noise. You maneuver them to be closest to it, so they start freaking out the most, and then it spreads around. And also as a host, you start building as well. Like at the start, you're a little bit more light and a little, crack a few jokes here and there. And we used to have this bit because the theatre that leads into the tank room was the last bit of the tour. And before we'd go in there, we'd make this big, this is where you get this is where you earn your bread. You'd be like, oh, the other places has been like, just anecdotes and stuff. But like, we're about to go into the theatre. And you'd make this big thing of like, everyone knows that theatres are haunted. Things that happened in this building that cannot be explained. The staff of the theatre refuse to go up to the top level alone. And I go, make no mistake, this place is haunted. So you make this big thing. And that's where you should have everyone by this point. And the rest used to be gravy by it. We get into the rhythm. We edited it. We cut the bits that didn't work. We embellish the bits that do. We're getting real. And people are losing their minds on this ghost tour some nights. Some nights people walk away and go, oh, that was fun. Sometimes people walk away and they're not scared at all. But seriously, the people that got scared, one guy had a near heart attack. I mean, there's this massive guy and we had a slam go off and he just screamed and then he just clutched his chest to the point where I was like, oh God, I don't think this guy's okay. And I was like, are you all right? And suddenly his voice just went, I'm all right. Yeah, I think I'm okay. Like we had people crying on the tour. Some people abandoned the tour. I mean, some people going, well, we were about to go to the theater. They were like, no, we're good. We're not going to continue the tour. We don't want a refund. We're good. We're good. You had some people, all sorts, like really leaning into the spirits and stuff. Like I had this one group go like, hey, yeah, we're ghost hunters. We really know about this and we're feeling things. And I'm like, oh yeah, you can feel it too, even though we know it's bullshit. And one of them goes, show them the pictures. And I'm like, what? And they pull out some photos and they've got some photos and they go, see these orbs? Look at those orbs. And I remember having to hold my tongue, almost like burst out laughing. But I had to go, you're absolutely right. You know what? Most lay people would simply pass this off as lens flare. But you and I both know what this really is, don't we? And they were like, yeah. I remember one time, it was going really well. It was going really well. And then I'll tell you something funny that happened on the tour. It was going really well. And I needed this money. This was like my backup. I do this tour about maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And we got into the rhythm of it. And my parents, who, they didn't want to see me throw away my job in IT to go and work as a performer. They were like, okay, we'll come along and watch this ghost tour. And normally on the tour, you'd have about 8 to 20 people, right? The night my parents come to watch me do this ghost tour thing that I've been doing and see how my career's going, it's my parents and one other guy. That's it. And I'm oh God. And I'm praying for a tornado. I'm praying for an act of God to just like make this not happen. So, it was so awkward. I am not me, by the way. I am in character, Mum and Dad. And one other guy. And we go around and it's just like the press night again. But then no one's getting scared. It's just so awkward. Like my parents are just walking around kind of like just being polite and listening. And this one other guy is just getting more and more bored. And the tension between it's like there's something weird between them as well. Like, this is just awful. Like, the slams, none of the effects are hitting. Like, there's a big bang, and like we just kind of sit there for a second looking at each other, and then I'm just like, well, let's move on then. It's just horrendous. And I go home that night. Like, they don't get scared at all. And at the end, I just have to be like, well, that was a tour. Thanks. Bye. And Mum and Dad are like, hey, thanks, son. Bye. And it's just horrendous. And I remember I went home that night, and I just put my head down on my hand, in my hands. I must have just stayed there for about 20 minutes. And I think I cried a little bit as well. Just like, I was so embarrassed. And it had just gone so terribly and awkwardly. And I was just thinking, what do my parents think of what's happening? And that's when I was like, I've got to make a change. I can't rely on the ghost tour. I've got to start doing something else. I think I started like really trying to launch myself more. Like, I think I was like, okay, I need to get an agent. I need to do things. I need to push more for like getting in productions and this and that. And, you know, that was really one of the most rock bottom times I remember. And it was just feeling like your parents are just embarrassed by you or something. And I talked to my parents the next day, and this is the kicker. They said, yeah, on the tour, the other guy, we used to work with him for a little bit. He's an asshole, and we hate each other. And I was like, oh, you could have told me that so much earlier, because I thought that was my fault. That, you know, that certainly would have not helped things. They would have been turning up going, oh my God, it's that asshole guy, but we've got to be polite. We can't ruin this already for our son. One of the worst things that ever happened on the tour, apart from that, was we were in the theatre, and up in the props cage room, you know, one of the creepiest places. And I'd just done the whole thing of like, staff will not come up here on their own. And I'm working with the group, and they've been hard work, but I think I've kind of got them by the time we get into the props cage, and I'm starting to notice some of them are getting scared. I'm like, oh, I've got you now. Perfect. Okay. And I'm telling the story of the guy that fell out the window and how his ghost haunts, and then suddenly, click, the lights come on. And I mean, like, at the end of a night, the nightclub lights come on. The blaring fluorescent lights come on, and then I hear footsteps and whistling leading up to where we are. And then one of the technicians of the theatre, Josh Major, if you're listening to this, I don't know if you remember this, he bursts into the room and he sees it and he goes, oh shit, sorry, Harv. Like, not Dr. Aloysius Mort. He goes, sorry, Harv, I forgot you got the tour on. And he goes, I just need to get something out of the props cage. So we kind of stand there awkwardly as he goes and unlocks the cage and gets in there, and he's looking around for the thing, and he grabs it, and he kind of does that little thing where he waves it up in the air triumphantly, like, found it. And he locks up again, and as he's leaving, he goes, all right, I'll turn off. He goes, ooh, I'll leave you to it. Ooh. And then I had to yell after him. I had to go, Josh, can you turn the lights off, mate? And then click, the lights go off. And then I have to try to... The tour is fucked. The tour is fucked at this point. Oh, I told Dan about this, and he could not stop laughing about this. A couple of things happened on the tour. Like, if we're talking about the ghosts, there were two things that happened that I could not explain. One, we were the last ones to lock up, right? And it was quite creepy up there on the yard, so I was glad he had the operator. And we would lock up and we would leave. And we knew some of the windows we were walking past. We knew from the outside of the building looking in. We knew where we'd been. We knew we'd locked up. We knew we'd turned all the lights off. We were, the operator and I, Hamish, we were finished up and just kind of like standing outside, counting the money and stuff. And I noticed like a little light, like a little... Like, if you imagine a fairy, like a little tiny blue light was floating down the hallway, but you couldn't quite see it, but like, there was definitely a light source floating down the hallway of one of the places we've been. And I looked at it nonchalantly, and then I realized there is no one in there. We have locked up. What the fuck is that light moving down the hallway? And then the second I kind of looked back, it was gone. But I remember definitely seeing something illuminating from inside the building. I was like, okay, that's a bit creepy. And the other thing, in the props room, where we would kind of like, that's where we kept all the lanterns and we, you know, the costumes and stuff. One night we were putting things away, and Hamish had left the room. And I heard the door open and close, leading to another part of the tour. And I thought, oh, that's Hamish. But then Hamish came through another door. And I suddenly thought, oh, that door, you know, the opposite door, there's no way he could have come through both doors. But the door that had opened, I thought it was the wind. And then I remembered, as I was leaving, it's a fire door. It's pressurized. It's got that gadget thing that pushes it closed. The wind cannot open that door. And I know we're the only ones in there. And I remember thinking the door definitely opened and closed like someone was walking through it. And those were the two things that I was like, this is the thing, I don't believe in ghosts, but I am shit scared of ghosts, if you know what I mean. Like, I'm like, ghosts don't exist. They don't exist, but do not leave me alone in that third floor props cage room. And that was it. That was the tour. I mean, God. It did teach us about scaring people. It did. And we wrote the thing. So I guess it was, you know, we should have been paid more for writing it, but we had practice in writing a script, making up stories to be convincing. Because that's the thing about making up a comedy story in improv is ridiculous. You know, no one cares about the details, but when you're doing a scary story that you need people to believe, it's the little details that kind of make or break it, you know? Oh, by the way, when I stepped away from it, they trained up another host to come and do it. And I went and watched one night just to see how, you know, because when someone else is doing it, like, you want to see what's changing, what's embellishing and stuff. And that story about Amelia, the ballerina, we'd ended it with, like, she'd be locked in the cupboard, she screams, she comes out and she never dances again, right? The host, when I went to go see it, he went, she never danced again. And then he added, 2 months later, she put her head in the oven and killed herself. And I was like, whoa, that escalated quickly. So yeah, this was a bonus episode. I might do other ones about other terrible gigs or interesting gigs that I'd had over the time. This has been fun, remembering that. I will catch you guys later. Thank you so much. Bye.